Por tu seguridad y la de todos, la Secretaría de Cultura y el Bosque de Chapultepec te invitan a colaborar con las siguientes medidas en caso de emergencia. Identifica las rutas de evacuación y las salidas de emergencia de este espacio. Mantén los accesos y rutas de evacuación despejados. Por tu seguridad y la de todos, la Secretaría de Cultura y el Bosque de Chapultepec te invitan a colaborar con las siguientes medidas en caso de emergencia. Identifica las rutas de evacuación y las salidas de emergencia de este espacio. Mantén los accesos y rutas de evacuación despejados. Por tu seguridad y la de todos, la Secretaría de Cultura y el Bosque de Chapultepec te invitan a colaborar con las siguientes medidas en caso de emergencia. Identifica las rutas de evacuación y las salidas de emergencia de este espacio. Mantén los accesos y rutas de evacuación despejados. Por tu seguridad y la de todos, la Secretaría de Cultura y el Bosque de Chapultepec te invitan a colaborar con las siguientes medidas en caso de emergencia. Identifica las rutas de evacuación y las salidas de emergencia de este espacio. Mantén los accesos y rutas de evacuación despejados. Por tu seguridad y la de todos, la Secretaría de Cultura y el Bosque de Chapultepec te invitan a colaborar con las siguientes medidas en caso de emergencia. Identifica las rutas de evacuación y las salidas de emergencia de este espacio. Mantén los accesos y rutas de evacuación despejados. Si estás acompañado previamente, coordina un punto de encuentro. Este es un recinto libre de basura. Te agradecemos lleves contigo los desechos que generes. Al dirigirse a las rutas de evacuación, mantén la calma. Recuerda, no correr, no empujar, no gritar. Ayuda a ancianos, niños y mujeres embarazadas. Aléjate de lugares que representen algún riesgo para ti o los tuyos. Coopera con los encargados de seguridad. Es de suma importancia estar atento a las indicaciones de los organizadores de este evento. Su colaboración y conservar siempre la calma será muy importante para su seguridad. La Secretaría de Cultura y el Bosque de Chapultepec agradece tu visita. Al permanecer en este espacio, autorizo a la Secretaría de Cultura, a través del Complejo Cultural Los Pinos y Bosque de Chapultepec, para que utilice mi imagen en fotografías o videos, que serán utilizados sin fines de lucro para difundir las actividades en redes sociales y medios de comunicación. En caso de no autorizarlo, acercarse a las personas organizadoras para dar aviso. Lo anterior con fundamento en los acuerdos y lineamientos de transparencia, acceso a la información pública y protección de datos personales. Agradecemos tu visita y recuerda seguir las redes de Los Pinos.
Ready? Go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable ministers, delegates, I hope we have all been having a fruitful experience at Mondiacult 2022, and I'd like to congratulate UNESCO and particularly the host government of Mexico and all partners on staging this important meeting, and to thank you for the excellent arrangements which have been put in place and the warm Mexican hospitality that we have experienced so far. Welcome to this panel on culture and sustainable development. We have a panel of ministers and other experts to help us to examine, reflect on, and chart the way forward with respect to culture and sustainable development. The important role and transformative power of culture in promoting social cohesion, respect for diversity, and resilience building is increasingly being acknowledged in global development discourse on sustainable development. Culture shapes the meaning and people's understanding of the concept of development and determines how we relate to each other and to our environment. culture functions as an enabler of sustainable development and inclusive social development, and provides people and communities with a strong sense of identity and delivers the unique historical and contemporary context that facilitates sustainable, inclusive development outcomes. As a driver of sustainable development and inclusive economic growth, cultural heritage, creative industries, festival and cultural tourism as elements of the creative economy facilitate wealth creation and employment, poverty reduction, and youth engagement. In relation to environmental sustainability, culture promotes the protection of cultural and biological diversity and natural heritage as crucial to sustainable development. It has been posited that in addition to the economic, social, and environmental dimensions, culture is the fourth pillar of sustainable development by virtue of the contribution it makes to the other pillars and its unique role in promoting social justice, empowerment, participation, and equality in relation to youth, women, Indigenous, and other marginalized groups. It is important to highlight that certainly for small island developing states, the importance of culture was recognized both in the Mauritius Strategy Outcome Document in 2005 and the Samoa Pathway in November 2014 as one of the issues that are critical for the further development of SIDS, demonstrating greater appreciation of culture in the sustainable development discourse. In this context, I now invite our panelists to share their perspectives on culture and sustainable development. We will hear first from Her Excellency, Ms. Soraya Moulouji, Minister for Culture and the Arts of Algeria, by way of a video.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيد الرئيس، أصحاب المعالي الوزراء، أصحاب السعادة، رؤساء الوفود، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. إن الأدوار الاقتصادية للثقافة أصبحت اليوم من البديهيات المسلم بها في اقتصاديات الدول بالنظر إلى قدرتها على خلق الثروة ومناصب الشغل، وقد أضحى من الضروري التأكيد على دورها في التنمية المستدامة. وإدراكاً لأهمية الثقافة في التنمية، أولت الحكومة الجزائرية دعماً للاستثمار في البنى التحتية وخلق المؤسسات ودعم المبدعين والجمعيات من خلال الإنفاق العمومي وتحفيز القطاع الخاص على الاستثمار في الإنتاج والتوزيع الثقافيين. إن التنمية الثقافية المحققة جعلتنا اليوم أكثر من أي وقت مضى على وشك تحقيق الهدف 11 والهدف 11/4، حيث تم إحداث شبكة واسعة من المرافق الثقافية في مختلف ربوع بلدنا الشاسع، تتشكل من عديد المؤسسات الثقافية تحت الوصاية في شتى مجالات الثقافة والفنون والتراث. كما أن المقاربة الاقتصادية الجديدة للتراث الثقافي المنتهجة من قبل الحكومة تساهم إلى حد بعيد في تطوير السياحة الثقافية وتثمين مكانة المواقع الأثرية والمعالم التاريخية في الدينامية الاقتصادية باعتبارها من روافد التنمية الإقليمية. وفي سياق متصل تكتسي الجهود المبذولة بغرض ترقية التراث الثقافي غير المادي أبعاداً تنموية تساهم في خلق مناصب الشغل في الحرف والصناعات التقليدية والعمل المنزلي، لا سيما في المناطق النائية، وكذلك لدى المرأة الماكثة بالبيت. كما أن إشراك السكان في المناطق الصحراوية في حماية التراث والتنوع البيولوجي ورصد الانتهاكات التي تتعرض لها يشكل عاملاً أساسياً في المقاربة المنتهجة والتي تهدف إلى إشراك الساكنة في إنجاح البرامج والخطط المسطرة. إن تعزيز هذه المبادرات يقتضي بالضرورة ترقية التعاون مع برنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي الذي يساهم في تحقيق نماذج وتجارب ناجحة وحيوية على غرار برنامجها الأخير في الحظائر الثقافية الجزائرية، والمتمثل في برنامج المحافظة على التنوع البيولوجي ذو الأهمية العالمية والاستعمال المستدام لخدمات الأنظمة البيئية بالحظائر الثقافية في الجزائر. كما أنه يتعين أيضا تفعيل مختلف البرامج والفرص المتاحة من قبل المنظمات الدولية والجهوية التي تعمل بالأساس.
Thank you. I'd now like to give the floor to Her Excellency, Ms. Rosalind Paul, Minister for Sports, Culture and Community Development, Dominica.
Good afternoon to all, good evening to all. And first let me commend, on behalf of the people and government of Dominica, commend UNESCO for this initiative and Mexico for this excellent hosting of this conference. A cross-cutting approach to culture links interests which was once thought to be isolated from each other, creating unprecedented synergies. This can be accomplished through collaboration, alliance building, and policy formulation, and development yielding both tangible and intangible outcomes. The Commonwealth of Dominica, the nature island of the Caribbean, prides itself in rich cultural heritage and diversity. Our people-oriented approach is inclusive of all those who share landscape, particularly the Kalinago, our indigenous people, to whom an entire government ministry is dedicated. In Dominica, many community traditions have stood the test of time. One such is called Kudme, or lend a hand, a system by which the community pools together its human resources through volunteerism to assist family members, neighbors, and other residents with the gesture of being reciprocated in the future when the need arises. This has become so entrenched in the Dominican way of life that there is an annual day dedicated to community development dubbed the National Day of Community Service. This is aided by a vibrant local government network guided by a department mandated to oversee community development island-wide. And currently, this department is undertaking capacity building strategies to build stronger and more resilient communities in the wake of the devastation caused by Hurricane Maria 5 years ago. Increasingly, the region and wider world are viewing culture outside of the realm of performance-based traditional and cultural expressions, such as music, dance, and theater arts, and acknowledge the concept that culture is indeed the way of life of a people, that also encapsulates language preservation, oral traditions, fashion, cuisine, agriculture, traditional herbal remedies, traditional architecture, dress, craft, art, and community values, and so much more. To establish, document, measure, and develop the linkages between culture and other areas, affirmative action and policy formulation are critical. This is akin to Dominica's Cultural Act, Town and Village Council ordinances, Intellectual Property Act, the National Cultural Policy, and our new National Resilience Development Strategy, as well as those others implemented. I stand in a position to vouch for the impact that low-income credit facilities, and that's one of our strategies in Dominica to help the creative sector. We have put in place low credit facilities, low interest, concessionary loans, and grants, technical and financial support to small businesses with a great focus on the creative industries. Further, Dominica has a thrust towards the digital economy and provides opportunities for young men and women to take advantage of digital platforms to advance the creative industries. Public sector relations, public-private sector relations, and partnership also serve as incubators for cultural growth and sustainable development. The concept is not very far-fetched. Community tourism, heritage tourism, the maintenance of historical sites, promoting a culture of peace, cleanliness, and beautification, health and wellness, self-sustainable cultivation, both for consumption and craft production, cultural edification, language preservation, to name a few, collectively give the blueprint for a cross-cutting approach to cultural development. Our geographical location does not afford us the opportunity to argue whether climate change is real or not. We have experienced it. We experienced the loss of 226% GDP affected the effects of Hurricane Maria 5 years ago. So we have experienced what the impact of climate change can be on the economy. And that includes the destruction of heritage sites as well and aspects of our culture. In the wake of Hurricane Maria, the Prime Minister of Dominica articulated the vision of Dominica becoming the first climate resilience country in the world. And we are working feverishly towards that, not only in terms of infrastructure, but investment in cultural arts, cultural sites, as well as strengthening communities, because if we speak resilience, we have to speak resilient people. Meantime, the new global accord influencing and directing the policies and action on all national fronts, of which Dominica is no exception, is founded upon the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 18. And we as a country, we are working towards that. Finally, I will say that we offer the opportunities for the world to be part of our cultural development through the World Creole Music Festival every October, and that is one way we have been supporting the cultural development not only of the region, but of the world. But we look forward to committing ourselves to the declaration that will be signed, agreed upon in this conference.
Thank you, Minister. Let me now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Patrick Dauda Mugu Iyama. Sir, forgive me if I mangled your name. Minister of Higher Education, Scientific Research, Technology Transfer, Culture and Arts, Gabon.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to express to you on behalf of the government of Gabon and the highest state authorities our sincere gratitude. The wealth of our cultural heritage is a legitimate source of national pride and of openness to the world. It aims to position Gabon on the front line of the fight to protect and value cultural and creative industries. Likewise, the relationship between culture and sustainable development are taken into account by the state in the composition and implementation of public policies so that the national economy can be less impacted by the variations in revenues of raw materials, the exploitation of which can be incompatible with the demands of preservation of the environment and sustainable development. In terms of attaining this objective, there are two levers of activity. The first takes into account endogenous knowledge in the fight to preserve biodiversity and fight climate change. It's a matter of integrating in public policies the knowledge and know-how of the local populations in terms of management of ecosystems. The UNITWIN network, BLSB, is working intensely to reveal the principles and the decreed methods and practices for traditional populations. BLSB brings together 4 universities in Africa and Europe, the University of Yaoundé, Brazzaville, Marienne, Agoubille, Léon II, and University of Omar Bongo, Libreville. The results of the research on the situation in Gabon are the perfect illustration of the productivity of that partnership, of that South-South and South-North partnership. Indeed, 90% of the 270,000 square kilometers of our land is covered by forest. The majority of the 230,000 square kilometers of our sea land is rigorously preserved. This natural heritage is inestimable. Food prohibitions, sacred forests, restrictions to access to marine parks, and to our lagoons and rivers. Also, the methods for fishing and for hunting are the backbone of this system. And it's a fact that in Gabon, the preservation of the environment and protection of culture work hand in hand. And that's why the ministries in charge of culture and research, waters and forests, tourism are working in synergy on this matter. In La López, central east of Gabon, and Fleuron, or the flagship work. The second lever concerns the development of cultural and creative industries that are developing and that will enable the creation of value chains to be less dependent on raw materials. The recent implementation of an important fund to support artists and development of cultural incubators are initiatives that translate into the will of the state to no longer be subject to the variables of adjustment at the structural level, but to see the catalyzing of production of sustainable wealth. Likewise, allow me to take this opportunity to warmly thank UNESCO and the European Union in their assistance. Likewise, how not to go through with a training without which any qualitative leap would be a mere illusion. Thus, going through training, initial or ongoing, one must make place for the training in the disciplines of management of culture. At the end of the day, in Gabon, we want to contribute to our GDP so that we are not so dependent on raw materials in the international markets. The statute of artists that enable us to work in this sense has done a tremendous amount. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister. Let me now give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Peter Roos, Permanent Representative of Germany to UNESCO.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, ministers, colleagues, dear friends, I'm very happy to have the chance to express myself today before you. Yesterday, I was asked, the last time that you met with the ministers of culture was 40 years ago. Do you have anything to say? I said, well, first, you jumped the Stockholm meeting that was devoted to development, and secondly, the ministers of culture meet every 2 years at the UNESCO General Conference. However, great occasions deserve great meetings, and Mexico today has the possibility of creating something of that nature again. I recognize the Mexican government for its invitation to UNESCO and all contributors here to the success of this conference. Why do we have the need to meet today? Well, the world has problems that have to be dealt with urgently. Climate change, the loss of biodiversity, challenges such as digital transformations, as well as other challenges are forcing us to act very quickly. In addition to that, we have a war And we would never have imagined that we would have seen this bestiality, this barbarity in Europe, in Ukraine. Armenia was saying earlier that we can simply we just want to go and see and turn right around and leave Ukraine. This is absolutely terrible. It is martyrized, but it is not standing still. I am certain that one day it will be liberated. I want to speak of the great goal of this conference, that is to say, to register culture as a global public good in the world as an SDG in the 2030 agenda. We already have goal number 17, which is education, but we absolutely need culture to be able to contribute and help us to reach those goals. What does culture mean? Well, clearly, there is sustainable development culture. We speak of a culture of parliamentarian work, culture in many different senses. But there is also the possibility of culture to contribute to fulfilling the SDGs. And here I am referring to the possibility of providing special content to be able to change the world so that with culture we can help contribute to ecology with all of the means necessary. Now, that does not mean that culture should not stay free. It must, the most important thing for an artist is his or her liberty. We, as those responsible for cultural policy, we also need to specify the direction in which it needs to go. So we need to begin with a very small idea of introducing the idea of fair trade. You all know the chocolate that is fair trade. You're eating it because it's great quality, but also because you know that you feel good when you eat that chocolate because you know that it's coming from social standards that are being fulfilled in a situation of fair trade. It's a good idea. Now we think about what can we do for culture? Can we have a fair trade for culture? Can we have fair culture? The idea of fair culture per se is worthwhile to discuss. There's an extraordinary study produced from the Véronique Guévremont at the University of Laval, and I recommend it fully to you because it contains all of the elements of how we can not copy but transfer fair trade to fair culture. Clearly, we cannot cut and paste. We need to discuss it. But if we are able to try to find a standard, a label for social standards in a creative study and general culture and introduce the human rights into culture, I think that we will have a label of a concrete measure and the facilities for the clients who watch a movie or go to the theater and understand that culture, whether it is part of fair culture or not. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for having taken so long to express my ideas.
Thank you, Ambassador. We will now hear from the Honourable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport of Jamaica, by video.
Mr. President, Director General, Assistant Director General, Excellencies, it is my privilege to address you all. Regrettably, I'm having to do so electronically. Nonetheless, on behalf of all delegations, we thank our host country, Mexico, for the gracious and meticulous planning that has brought everyone together for this conference. We express solidarity with the citizens of Puerto Rico, the Cayman Islands, Cuba, and all other countries which are being affected by Hurricane Ian currently passing through our region. It underscores the vulnerability of the Caribbean small island developing states. which suffer this real-life challenge annually. It is the resilience of the Caribbean people that has had us withstand the ravages of climate change, to which small island developing states contribute minimally, but are most seriously impacted by climate insecurity. At this time, we call for urgent dynamic partnerships with developed countries in the promotion of climate justice. One of the most formidable lessons learned from the global pandemic is that national borders may not be sufficient to prevent the impact of negative forces affecting another country. This concept of shared fortunes or misfortunes must be the platform in which we build inclusive and sustainable cultural policies. We need dynamic partnerships for sustainable and inclusive cultural policies, anchored in multi-tiered cooperation, concrete collaborative solutions, and sustained and sustainable actions and activities. We must together shape the policies to address all matters consequent on development and sustainability. We must ensure that our policies place appropriate focus on research and development, enable business and accelerate development. Policy formulation must seek to stimulate global trade, see to capacity building within our countries and region, as well as to secure intergenerational transmission of our culture. We must monetize our cultural assets and pay attention to intellectual property. The status of the artist is a global imperative. Mobility is key. We must craft policies that facilitate that mobility. We call for culture to be a dedicated SDG. Finally, colleagues, today the world reels from growing domestic and global crises. Culture as a tool for building bridges of peace is invaluable. We can use culture to ease tension and promote dialogue to reduce high incidences of violence. We can use culture to promote gender equality and reduce violence against women and girls. We can use culture to reduce racial disharmony and promote global peace and the philosophy of one love. In all this, let this global conference reflect the coming together of cultural policy focal points across the world. We must engender partnerships anchored in concrete outcomes and policies that reflect the role of culture in sustainable prosperity in which no one is left behind. Let us work to create a world that is just, equitable, and prosperous. I wish to thank our moderator, the Director General of UNESCO, the European Union Ambassador to Mexico, and the Secretary of UNESCO 2005 Convention for organizing this important gathering. I thank you all. One love.
I thank the Honorable Minister, and we've already heard from two small island developing states on the threat to the culture that climate change brings as they contemplate the loss of land. And now we hear from yet another threatened small island state in the Pacific, Kiribati. I give the floor to His Excellency, the Honorable Mr. Butu Patel, Bari, Minister of Internal Affairs.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and the panel member, warm greetings to you all. Please allow me to take this opportunity to express our deep appreciation to our gracious host, the government and the people of Mexico, for the warm hospitality since our arrival in your beautiful country. I also extend our gratitude to the UNESCO Secretariat for the excellent running of the Mondiacult 2022. I wish to take this opportunity to highlight a few achievements and issues in Kiribati in the cultural sector in relation to sustainable development. Kiribati is a NATO country less than 3 meters above the sea level with a rich cultural heritage. The people of Kiribati value their culture, which has sustained them for generations and is providing a strong backbone in the time of globalization and urbanization. Like other countries, we face many challenges with our cultural heritage. Also, we believe that culture contributes greatly to the achievement of sustainable development goals. For instance, I would say that we cannot meaningfully speak of sustainable development without culture. In our own way, we try to meet our global applications and national aspiration on achievement sustainable development goals through culture. Protecting, preserving, and promoting our culture heritage is very important to us to ensure that our ancestors' seed of wisdom, knowledge, and skills are not lost from the aspect of history of our country. we are grateful that our government values culture greatly and as it's one of the main pillars of the Kiribati vision for the next 20 years, recognizing its social and economic values that contribute to sustainable development. The development of the cultural economy can bring to life important cultural heritage sites and artistic work and create additional economic opportunities for local people. Through culture, we can connect to tradition and practices that value cohesion in our society and ensure inclusivity, as well as address gender inequalities. Traditional coping mechanisms and traditional knowledge can be applied to help us prepare and respond to natural disaster and the effect of climate change. For instance, to promote food security in the extent of climate change, we are working on reviving and practicing traditional skills with the communities on the preparation of preservation method of local foods that could be kept for longer periods. Our culture is our biggest asset and our driver to enable of the socio-economic, environment, and spiritual well-being. I'm happy to say that my government has recently established the legislation in Kiribati, the Umanapong Act 2022, for the protection, preservation, and promotion of the museum and cultural heritage in its parliament sitting just last month. This is a great milestone taken by the Kiribati government, as this is the first legislation to establish ever since the Culture and Museum Office came into existence. We believe that this legislation will not contribute to protecting and safeguarding the cultural heritage and museum, but also contribute to the sustainable livelihood of our local people and maintaining peace and security. We are exploring options that safeguard the culture, heritage, and the identity of the Kiribati people in this world through mainstreaming of culture into national and sector policies. The government has mainstreamed culture into Kiribati National Development Plan, making it one of its key priorities to focus on its 4 years plan. Additionally, aspects of cultural heritage have also been mainstreamed into sector policies, including the Kiribati Joint Implementation Plan for the Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management, the Kiribati Integrated Environment Policy, to name a few. I wish to stress that the Kiribati, like other Pacific countries, capacity development, technology transfer, and financial resources remaining among our top priorities to put our plans into action and implementation of our national effort. The geographical features of Kiribati, its isolation and where islands are scattered across a vast ocean, poses challenges in the implementation and monitoring of the cultural programs because of the costs involved. UNESCO plays a major role in advocating and mobilizing resources and funding for capacity building and institutional strengthening. We look to UNESCO to ensure that our issues, challenges, and priorities are fully reflected in UNESCO program of work. To this end, I also acknowledge the important role of the international and partner cooperation to advance the role of the culture across regional and global policy fora, thus highlighting its multi-phase impact on sustainable development. The Maori, te roi au te tapo moa, health, peace and prosperity to you all. Kamrapa. Thank you.
I thank the Minister, and I give the floor to His Excellency Uldis Sarins, Deputy State Secretary for Cultural Policy, Latvia.
Thank you. Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Minister of Culture of Latvia, Mr. Norris Punto, let me first start by congratulating the government of Mexico and UNESCO for organizing this incredible event, which I'm sure will have a lasting impact on cultural policies all over the world. It is often said that the culture should be at the heart of sustainable development. Indeed, as it was aptly mentioned in one of the side events, try to implement any of sustainable development goals without culture and see how it goes. Nevertheless, it's also a common knowledge that the current SDG framework is ill-fitted to recognize the role of culture in sustainable development. Latvia faced this challenge firsthand this year while drafting the voluntary national report on implementation of SDGs. Although cultural sector submitted plenty of examples of their SDG activities, they were left out of the report just because they did not have a fitting place. So, to remedy this, we organized the side event of the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development called The Transformative Nature of Libraries and Museums as Safe Spaces for Dialogue and Information Literacy. And I do encourage to look it up on YouTube. I believe it's really quite good. So, it is quite obvious that both in discussing the SDGs for after 2030 and also in drafting national development strategies, the culture has to be mainstreamed, so it strengthens every policy area. However, at the same time, we have to recognize two things: that culture is no silver bullet for solving all the world problems, and that culture, while very powerful, is also very vulnerable. The greatest power of culture lies in that it can address societies through a language which is very different from the language used by politicians, scientists, or media, for it can touch not only people's minds, but also hearts and souls. It shapes us into who we are as individuals, communities, and nations. Culture is what makes us human. This is why culture is such a powerful instrument for societal change. It provides us with universal human values, which are the basis for human-centered development. However, this power should be used responsibly. Culture, as all the great powers, can also be misused, for example, in the context of soft power or even weaponized. Because of its intrinsic power, culture can be a threat to undemocratic forces, and it can become a target. We are witnessing today that cultural heritage and cultural institutions of Ukraine are targeted and destroyed by Russian military actions. And even somehow worse, the absurd argument that Ukrainian culture and language is somehow inferior to the mighty Russian culture and language is used as a justification for attack on a sovereign country. Unfortunately, Russian barbarism in Ukraine is not just an isolated incident, a cruel whim of a sick mind, as cultural and cultural heritage too often is explicitly targeted during all kinds of conflicts. The Constitution of UNESCO states, since wars begin in the minds of men, it is the minds of men that defenses of peace must be constructed. The current events, including in Ukraine, clearly shows that we are still far from achieving this noble ideal, that the universal values of UNESCO are by no means self-evident. This is why we cannot afford to take our culture for granted. This is why we have to defend it and fight for it every day. To conclude, It is evident now more than ever that we must double down our efforts to ensure resilience of our culture. If we agree that culture is what makes us human, we must act to protect it, to foster it, to use it for a greater good, so that we can preserve our humanity and pave the way for human development in all areas. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will now hear from His Excellency, Mr. Michael Biswick Uzi, Minister of Tourism, Culture and Wildlife of Malawi.
Thank you. Excellencies, esteemed delegates, I bring you greetings from the President of the Republic of Malawi, Dr. Lazarus Makathi Chakwera. And on the outset, let me appreciate Mexico for organizing this event. The mere fact that we are together here discussing culture for sustainable development, it gives us an opportunity to share, to ask questions. We should not be under any illusion whatsoever that all is well in as far as culture acceptance is concerned. We are all products of our environment. When or if the environment is hostile, the people become hostile. I am Malawian, but I feel like I'm in Malawi, in Mexico, because of peace, because of love, because of the coexistence that we are appreciating. This is the culture that we should support. This is the culture that we should emulate. Now, coming to the subject of culture for sustainable development. When we talk about sustainable development, we are now looking at the beneficiaries of the development. We are talking about their acceptance, their ownership. We are also talking about the donor partners. How do they interface? Because we have issues of cross-culture and ethnocentrism, where people think that my culture is superior to other people's culture. When people think that their culture is superior, we get into problems. Malawi supports UNESCO's pathway of promoting culture. Malawi, for example, has supported arts, culture, and heritage as levers for building the Malawi that we want. We would like to call upon all member states to understand each other's culture so that when we come together, when we meet, we are not judgmental. We understand each other's culture from the emic interpretation. We understand each other's culture without judgment, because the authenticity of every culture lies the beauty. Malawi would like to assure UNESCO that we support the resolutions, we will actively participate, and let us coexist, and let us promote peace, because culture is about peace. Culture is about joy. Culture is about knowledge management. Culture is about knowledge sharing. Let's all promote peace and coexist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We will now hear by video from Her Excellency, the Honorable Ms. Giomara Maduro, Minister of Culture, Aruba.
President of Mondiacult 2022, Assistant Director General for Culture of UNESCO, my colleagues, Ministers of Culture of all over the world, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, On behalf of the government of Aruba, I congratulate Mexico for organizing and hosting this important event. The eyes of the world are on culture, and rightfully so, since culture has the power to determine the development of humanity. Culture is, amongst others, the manifestation of ideas, human intellectual and creative achievement, social behavior, and customs that are widely influenced by education in all forms and catalyzed by technology and world scientific advances. The recent global events like the COVID-19 pandemic, natural disasters, and geopolitical conflicts have shown communities all over the world the urgency in building resilience and putting serious effort in ambitions regarding sustainable development. Aruba is a small island developing state, SIDS, or a large ocean state, depending on your conceptual view. The vulnerabilities in both cases are generally known. In Aruba, we have chosen to embrace our challenges and to focus on the advantages that culture can provide. I hereby give some examples. Concrete measures are being taken to bring culture education in the formal and non-formal education as well as in the society as a whole, through research aimed at providing insight into the needs of artists and creatives. We try to use effective and meaningful instruments to support the creative sector. The preservation of documentary heritage has seen a huge leap in the past 2 years. Documentary heritage that is accessible to a wide audience contributes to social discussion about the past in relation to the future and can be a source of inspiration for creative expression. We should make continuous efforts to show the importance of a balanced society where culture is sustained as a means of education and of sustainable development in our way of doing business and the way we live. Thus, the time is always right to educate, persevere, and stimulate a forward-looking approach in which culture enables innovation, behavioral change, and economic growth. Mr. President, I thank UNESCO for this opportunity and reiterate our commitment in Aruba to put culture at the heart of sustainable development. Mashadanki. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And we will now hear by video again from His Excellency Bernie Bush, Minister of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage of the Cayman Islands.
Hello, Mondiacult. I am honored to join you via video to share how the Cayman Islands is strengthening its commitment to protecting and preserving our cultural assets for future generations. We also look forward to learning what other jurisdictions are doing in respect to culture. Our participation here is a clear sign that we are fully committed to striking a balance between continuity and change. As a country, we are prioritizing our cultural markers, ensuring that there is no future damage because of inadequate legislation. As Minister for Culture and Heritage, my portfolio is quite diverse. Having been formed under a government just more than a year ago, one of my ministry's key priorities is to raise awareness and preserve the culture and heritage of our nation. This commitment reflects the importance that the Cayman Islands government places on retaining and celebrating our uniqueness and national identity. It also guides many of our main operational initiatives, which raise awareness of our cultural assets, promote cross-agency partnerships, and encourage sustainable development. Just to provide a little background, the Cayman Islands is a relatively young nation with a maritime and settlement history dating from the late 1600s. Nevertheless, a rapid development from the islands that time forgot to one of the largest offshore banking and financial centers in the last 50 years has been quite amazing. This transformation from 3 islands known chiefly for farming and seafaring to an internationally recognized tourism and financial services hub has come as a result of fast-paced urban development. This has led to the destruction of many valuable properties and artifacts of our built and natural heritage in the past 5 decades, which has become a growing public concern. As a result, we're adopting a more responsive and robust culture of safeguarding sustainable development. With 162 nationalities representing more than 50% of Cayman's population, there is an increasing need to preserve what is left of our culture so that our youth and future generations know what it means to be Caymanian. Additionally, being a British Crown colony located in the Caribbean and our proximity to the U.S. and its far-reaching cultural pull means that we must double down on our efforts. To achieve this, my ministry is taking a diverse approach to strengthening awareness of our unique culture and heritage. We recognize the need for a responsive legislative framework to identify, record, and protect our national assets, as well as creating initiatives which have an intergenerational approach where elders can pass on their knowledge. Earlier this year, we sent a group of Caymanian authors and illustrators to an international creatives workshop in Gibraltar. The ministry understands the importance of having Caymanians create Caymanian content that tells our stories. To that end, we have commissioned them to write and illustrate children's books that will teach our youth about their islands. In addition, my ministry has also set up initiatives like the National Culture and Heritage Task Force. This task force consists of partners such as the National Trust of the Cayman Islands, the Ministry of Sustainability, and the Ministry of Tourism. The task force has responsibility for identifying natural and built heritage, detecting weaknesses in our existing legislation, and making recommendations on how to safeguard our heritage assets. Other initiatives and programs include Caymanian Proud, a televised series of panel discussions identifying culturally significant persons and institutions, past and present. Culture Day, which annually recognizes and celebrates the culture of the Cayman Islands in terms of food, pastimes, and the performing arts, and Saturdays in the Park, a quarterly culturally themed program that invites the public to share their creativity. We are also in the process of setting up a national identity task force to determine our national dress, national dish, and other national symbols. Finally, while sustainability may be the new buzzword within the developed world, it is nothing new to Cayman, as a traditional Caymanian way of life is based on sustainability. Traditional Caymanian homes were built to take advantage of the prevailing winds to stay cool, eliminating the need for central air conditioning and fans. Our homes were built with hipped and gable roof to counteract hurricane-force winds from hurricanes. Our forebears ate seasonal produce and only took what they required from the sea and the land. Being sustainable is as Caymanian as Sunday trips to the beach. We therefore need to ensure we build on lessons from the past and plan for the future through careful management and by increasing national awareness of cultural preservation. I thank you for your time and look forward to learning from other delegations. Thank you and have a good day.
I thank you. Before I give the floor to the 2 observers who will speak, just to note that I picked up from the panel several calls for adding culture to the SDGs. I really appreciated hearing from many the importance of the role of community in preserving culture and the importance of culture in sustainability. And as we were so passionately reminded by Jamaica, the role that culture can play in bridging divides and helping us deal with some of the more pernicious issues that we deal with, in particular, gender violence and other forms of discrimination. So thank you all for a very rich discussion, and let me give the floor to a video presentation now from Ms. Marija. I know I'm going to mangle this name, so apologies beforehand. Pejsinovic Buric, Secretary General, Council of Europe.
This year's Mondiacult is testament to UNESCO's understanding of the role that culture plays in our societies. At the Council of Europe, we share that perspective. We know that culture affirms our identity and brings us together in dignity, equality, and understanding. A point emphasized by the Ministers of Culture of our 46 member states at their ministerial conference in April. Mondiacult 2022 puts an emphasis on sustainability, and rightly so. Over the years, the Council of Europe has crafted a range of tools designed to achieve that objective, in line with our commitment to help meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Take our approach to environmental harm and climate change. Our work is now guided by our Committee of Ministers' recent recommendation on the role of culture, cultural heritage, and landscape in helping to address global challenges. On territorial and economic development, our European Culture Heritage Strategy for the 21st century is key, focusing on the relationship between heritage, the economy, and local and regional governance. And when it comes to new technological challenges, we have taken a number of initiatives, ranging from standard setting for our member states through to our publication last year on culture, arts, and artificial intelligence, reflecting our role in ensuring that artificial intelligence enriches human culture and does not threaten it. This year's Joint Council of Europe and EU European Heritage Days focuses on the theme of sustainable development, including a wide range of activities to raise awareness and public participation. The aims are naturally and closely aligned with Mondiacult. So I commend the organization of this event and the commitments of its participants. I wish you every success.
Thank you. And our final speaker will be Mr. Leandro Mialo, Chair of the International Council of Museums, Chile.
Muchas gracias, UNESCO.
Muchas gracias, UNESCO. Thank you very much, Mexico. Dear ministers, vice ministers, dear colleagues from culture. This August 24th, under the framework of the 16th ICOM conference in Prague, the General Assembly approved a new definition of a museum. This is the outcome of a participative meeting in which thousands of professionals of museums have participated of 126 committees worldwide. This new definition matches with some of the changes in the role of museums, such as inclusion, participation of the community, and sustainability. By the same token, it gathers the proposals that 50 years ago from Latin America in Santiago de Chile, the round table made relative to the role of museums in the contemporary world. This is called by the International Museum Association. The museums play an important role for the development of their communities as well as their territories. Museums do not only educate and make their communities sensitive, but they are community leaders, and they address their own carbon and they encourage participation. Public policies and programs adapted to today's museums are necessary in order to support them in complying their transforming role of climate leaders and sustainability in their communities. Thus, a museum is a non-for-profit institution at the service of the society that investigates, collects, interprets, and showcases the material and non-material heritage open to inclusive people. Museums foster development. Museums operate and communicate ethically and professionally. They offer several experiences for the joy and exchange of knowledge. Dear authorities, don't underestimate the power of museums and promote their development. After the pandemic, they are needed for the good of our people and their heritage for a sustainable world. As ministers stated from Gabon and Latvia, we are our allies, your partners. Thank you very much.
For a very rich discussion, and you for being such a good audience. I wish you a good rest of your day.